Alright, first things first, let's take the spring tension off of the assembly. Alright, now that we have spring tension off, we want to loosen up the lock nut down here. That guy right there, with an 11/16 open end wrench. Now that our lock nut is loose, we're going to go ahead and loosen the collar nut here from the actuator shaft. Okay, now that we have the collar nut disconnected from the actuator shaft, valve stem drops. Now what we want to do is loosen the actuator shaft from the actuator output drive. This piece unthreads from this piece. We're going to turn that back about 4 turns. Right after I crack the shaft loose from the actuator output, I marked both of these, just made an alignment line, and then I turned the shaft down 3 turns. So right now I can go up 3, and that'll give me my original shaft height. It should stop pretty close. There we go. This gap here is about 1/10 of an inch. And then when we go 3 turns down, it becomes roughly 0.275. So what that's going to do is give us our de-energized seating compression when we tighten everything up. Alright, with our actuator shaft turned down 3 turns, I now want to reconnect my valve stem to the actuator shaft, making sure that the valve stem is all the way up in its de-energized position, which right now it is not. Alright, now that we have the valve in the fully upright or de-energized position, you can see that there's some play here between the actuator shaft and the collar nut. Ensuring that I keep the valve in the upright position, I want to attach the collar nut to the actuator shaft, making sure that I don't turn the actuator shaft. So I can hold this with pliers or a channel locks. And I like to have this nice and loose. That way I can properly align these threads. So the adjustment that we're making here is we're turning this shaft down an extra turn, because we normally go 2 turns. 3 turns should give you the extra de-energized compression in the upward position. So that's what our goal here is. Okay, I now have the collar nut tight to the actuator shaft. Now I want to lock the collar nut in place with my 7/16 lock nut here. And then once I have this tight to the lock nut, or to the collar nut, I'm going to put an alignment mark on there that I'll show you in just a bit. Alright, now that I've got the lock nut tight to the collar nut, I normally use a black marker, but I used red paint marker this time just so you can see it real easy. I've made an alignment mark with that lock nut in the stem of the valve. Reason being is I want to make sure that the stem of the valve and that lock nut are spinning together. They're not loose when I tighten the actuator shaft into the actuator, creating that upward compression of the top seat of the valve. So I'm going to go ahead. It should be fairly tight even now. Yeah, you're going to have to use the channel locks here, but it's going to be 3 turns all the way up, and you'll feel that the resistance will increase as we turn it up due to the seating. Okay, just got done tightening up the actuator shaft to the actuator output drive. Just verifying that my alignment marks still match up from valve stem to locking nut. And my alignment mark from actuator output shaft to actuator drive is just slightly off because I snugged this down pretty decent while holding this nut with a crescent wrench. So we have plenty of upward de-energized seating going on right now. So the only thing left to do is put on some test flanges and pressure test this guy before we ship it out. Right, I actually forgot one important step. After everything that we just got done doing, we have to reset our spring tension. The way that we do that is just with a plain tape measure to the bottom of the actuator yoke here. I want to get the top portion of this aluminum spring plate to 5.5 inches exactly. So I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. Okay, now that I have proper spring tension set, and again, that's just putting a tape measure at the inboard portion of the yoke there, verifying that I have 5.5 inches of space between the top of the yoke and the top of the spring plate here. And I'm just going to go ahead and secure the plate in place with the bottom lock nut, because there's already a decent amount of tension on this top lock nut. And then we'll pressure test and it's ready to go.